Hello and welcome to our new mod tool tutorial video. My name is Dragon, and in this video we are going to talk about colonization, NGOs and stock markets. Those are three distinct tools that add new features to the Realpolitiks II gameplay, and they are very different, but they are smaller features that are easy to explain and be covered in one video. So let me start by explaining the colonization. First of all, what you need to know is that provinces on your map can have two settings, and here is a ticker that differentiates between them. Is colony ticker. When disabled, this particular province can be a part of a country and can have its basic GDP and resource settings. But if you select different province, for example this one, 26, it has its colony ticker enabled, and that means that its type cannot be changed, its population is 0, its basic GDP is 0, and its resource production is also 0. So all of those values are basically non-existent. And that is because here in our colonization editor we can set up colony resources settings. And only the provinces with is colony ticker enabled can be colonized. And colonization is an action here that you can set up in your colonization actions editor. And what is important, here in the colonization action editor, you have this ticker, consumes colonization project. And when enabled, the projects that you're going to set up in the colonization editor here are going to be reset, and you would need to implement them from the start, from the beginning, to be able to colonize a province again. So this is the colonization editor, and like I've said, to the right there is the colonization project editor, and to the left you can set up starting resources for any colonized province. Before the province is colonized, its values are always 0, and after colonization you can decide what will those values be. And in this case I recommend to start with setting up maximal amount of resources that will be available for the colonized province. So for example, I can set up that my resource 1 will be at maximum 10, 5 and 3. And now as you can see, when colonized, a province will give me from 0 to 10 of first resource, and from 0 to 3 of third resource, and so on. And also I can set up the basic GDP for my colony, and I highly recommend giving here the values of, for example, at least 1 in each category. Because that way, after colonizing, each colonized province will have at least 1 population, 1 basic GDP, and 1 score. And here to the right, you can set up your land colonization projects and water colonization projects. By clicking this Add button, I have created level 0 colonization project. And to successfully colonize a province, you don't actually need those projects. You can simply skip them, and in your colonization action, you can leave this ticker disabled and simply set up province effect of colonization. But for this particular tutorial, we're going to leave this ticker enabled here and select this level 0 colonization project, and we can type here the colonization project name and its description, and you can choose the graphic for available images, and here you can set up the cost of the colonization, or rather the cost of implementing that particular colonization project. For example, 1000 money, 500 AP, and 50 of each resource, and the time necessary to implement that project, let's say 60 days. And you have to save values for each project level. And now I have created one level 0 land colonization project, and in the game, after implementing it, I will be able to use the colonization action that requires me to consume colonization project. And after setting up colonization effect in the province effect category, I will be able to use that action on any province that is available for colonization with the sticker here. And after colonization of this province will generate resource randomized from these values, and this province will have its basic GDP, population and score values randomized between those minimum and maximum values here. And that is the very simple colonization editor for you. You can add additional projects here and increase their costs, change their name, description, and graphics to make the colonization a little bit more costly and time consuming. Now let's talk about NGOs. NGO editor is very simple. It allows you to add non-governmental organization, and you can select and you can input also the host limit number. Let's leave it at 1 for now. And here you can input your name for your organization and its description. You can set up their friends and their enemies of this particular organization. And to actually set up NGOs, you need to use events. So basically NGOs work similarly to fundings in the sense that you need to set up particular events that allows you to manage NGO. And here you can input event title localization key or its name, so that the game knows that this particular event is used to ban. Here is the unban event input field, which also allows you to input event name, which will enable the host country to be unbanned from hosting that particular NGO. And each NGO has starting declarations with your country and starting popularity in your country. And here you can set them up. And when NGO is in your country, it will give you some effects. And those effects, those effects are divided into two categories: host modifiers and international modifiers. And host modifiers applies to the country that is hosting the NGO. In many cases it will be the player country. And the international modifiers are applied to all other countries. And here you can set up some effects, for example action points, or in this case we should actually use modifiers, so GDP growth for example. And here you can set up the minimal and maximal popularity that has to be reached in order for those effects to be applied to a particular country, for example host country. And for example this particular effect of increasing your GDP growth will be available only if you reach at least 30 popularity, and will be available until you reach 50. And now I can add another modifier that will be available from 51 to maximum of 100 popularity. And I can set up here GDP growth of, for example, 0.0007. And now, whenever my NGO popularity is between 30 and 50, I will have 0.0005 GDP growth increase. And in this interval between those minimum and maximum popularity, I will have this GDP growth. And that is basically how you set up your various NGOs here. Remember to save all. And stock markets work similarly. This editor is similar to the NGO editor. And as you can see here, you have default profit percent to set up your value of profit for your stock market. You have rate cooldown, which enables you to set up the number of days between the stock market rate will change. And you have invested pool multiplier. That is basically the GDP of your country times this number here, and this is the maximum investment for your country to be made on the stock market. And here you can set up your interventionism curve and its impact on the profit percent of your stock market. So for example, if I have an interventionism of 30, I would like my profit percent to be -4, for example, because high interventionism is not good for the stock market. But if my interventionism is, for example, at 0, I will have my profit percent increased by 3. And here I have market trend settings button. That brings up the stock market trend settings window. And here in this window, I can set up the interval that defines the time between trend checks. I can set the probability curve to modify the impact of interventionism on stock market trends. And I have some other settings down here. For example, the cooldown between the currents of trends, effect duration, and also the very important input fields here, boom event ID and crash event ID. And when the stock market boom or stock market crash occurs, those events will be spawned. And here there is a button to add new stock market packet. And as you can see, you can simply input here the name of your packet, description, GDP percentage, and the GDP percentage defines what percent of the GDP of the province with the stock market building and all neighboring provinces will be calculated. Here you can also set up your icon for a packet and packet costs that are needed to be paid when changing the type of packet on your stock market, the starting index, base range modifier, and minimum stock index for this particular packet, and also packet settings. And factors for packet are basically conditions that are set up in the conditions editor with various strength for each factor that allows you to modify how your stock market, how your trends will be affected by various conditions. So, for example, you can say that with a strength of with a negative factor strength of 5, whenever there is the war in the country with the stock market, the negative factor strength of 5 will be applied to the country. And it will affect the trend probability and lower the income from the stock market in the long term. Because factors are basically the power, the strength of the stock market, and if there are many negative factors enabled by their conditions, the stock market will start losing money instead of creating profits. And also you need to remember to save packets after setting them up. And also remember that when setting up buildings, you need to select here in the building functionality the stock market type. And then after building that building in your country, the stock market will be available for the player on the map. And after clicking this building on the map, the stock market pop-up will be opened in the game, and you can invest in that stock market in the selected packet that is defined here, and that packet will generate profits or generate losses based on the factors that you set up here. And that concludes our colonization, NGO and stock markets video. Thank you for watching and see you next time.